Okay, I'm recording it just to make sure.
Okay. All right. And Jason, you have host, so go right ahead.
Go ahead, Eric. Sorry.
Okay, so my name is Eric Talley, and I've been keeping bees this time since 2008 and controlling my varroa mites without using chemicals. And I'm not going to call you a bucket full of bad words if you're using chemicals, but I do want to say I talk to enough people that there's folks out there that don't want to use chemicals, that are doing nothing about their varroa mites because nobody's told them how to not do it. So what I want to do tonight is tell you why I don't use chemicals and show you what I do to control my varroa mite problem. So here's what we're talking about. And it's an ugly little bug, and that's about the size of a varroa mite would be if it was on us instead of a bee. So kind of a size comparison. All of you beekeepers have seen varroa mites, except for you new beekeepers. And so, and you're going to see them. There's no way around it. Every colony of bees has varroa mites. So I don't want to spend a lot of time on the life cycle, but what I do want to mention is when the varroa mite here on stage number 3 crawls into that cell and ultimately crawls out of the brood food when it's gone and starts feeding on this pupa like you're seeing here on the right, the varroa mite isn't killing our bees. The viruses that are being carried by the varroa mite is what's killing our bees. So when this varroa mite feeds on this pupa, and her offspring, which you can see they're kind of opaque there, her offspring is going to feed on this same spot. So if this fondress or the mother mite has viruses, her offspring are going to have viruses. So the ugly part is you can get rid of all of your varroa mites, but until the viruses are gone, which could take 3 to 5 brood cycles, it's a problem. So let me go. Maybe I went too quick there. So when a mite crawls into a cell, and I just took this was a article that was published both in the American Bee Journal and the Bee Culture back in October of 12 by this Zachary Hung up there in Michigan State. And depending on who you listen to or whose book you read, they all have different figures as to what the reproduction rate is. But just so you kind of get an idea, if the varroa mite crawls into a worker brood cell, her and one of her offspring makes it to maturity and crawls out. But more important, if that bee or that mite crawls into a drone brood cell, 2 of her offspring crawl out with her. So the varroa mite has figured out drone brood, because they take 3 days longer to hatch, is the best place to raise their mite. So part of this article states that there are 9 times as many mites in drone brood as there are in worker brood. That's very important when we get ready to figure out how to control them. So the mite stays in the phoretic stage, looking for a new home. This drone here in the upper right-hand corner's got about 7 mites on it. Drones can go to any colony because they beg for food. They can come and go wherever they want. This is a bad way to spread varroa mites. So anyway, here's a partial list of the viruses. The last time I heard, I believe there are currently about 20 or 21 viruses carried by the varroa mite in the state of North Carolina today. So, and there's only a couple of them that you can readily see with the naked eye. The deformed wing virus, both A and B being one of them, and the chronic bee paralysis virus, where the bee looks oily and no hair on it, and this dead one down here in the bottom with his tongue hanging out. Yeah. So, but this is the problem, is the viruses. So the sooner you can control the Varroa mites, the sooner you can control the viruses. Here's the biggest problem. We talked about that pupa being infected with viruses. If it doesn't kill the bee, what's the bee going to be doing 3 or 4 or 5 days after it hatches? Going to be feeding, developing larvae and spreading that virus. So again, the quicker you get rid of your mites, the better. If you wait until the fall and kill all your mites in November with an oxalic acid sublimation treatment, guess what? Your winter bees are infected. So you need to, so I'm going to tell you how I do it from the get-go in the spring. So here's one of the reasons I don't use chemicals. Inside of that bee cavity, whether it's one we give them or a tree or a wall or whatever, there are yeast and funguses and antimicrobials and microorganisms that are all beneficial to the honeybee, and they need those to be healthy. Okay. Why are we feeding probiotics to honeybees today? Probably because we're killing everything that's killing everything in the gut microbe when we're treating with chemicals. Here's something to think about. If we can't put chemicals to control the Varroa mites while you've got supers on your colony, what's in that honey that you're leaving for your bees to eat in the dead of the winter when nothing's there? It's slam full of them chemicals. How about the bees' bread that they need, the pollen, first thing in the spring to be raising bees? Is it full of chemicals? Do you know? Nobody's checking. So first thing you need to do is monitor. And I monitor 4 times a year as suggested. Down in the bottom right-hand corner, I got a picture of somebody doing a sugar shake. I would tell you that I have not done a sugar shake in 3 or 4 years. And the reason being, here on the coast, our humidity gets so high in the summertime that the powdered sugar, it clumps from the humidity and you don't get a good mite count. And the way I found that out, I did a sugar shake and then I put some alcohol in there and I shook them again. And I had more mites come out with the alcohol than I did with the powdered sugar because of the humidity. So I strictly go with alcohol washes now. Interesting enough, Randy Oliver out of California, when the pandemic hit and alcohol was hard to find, he started doing tests to see what other forms could you use to do an alcohol wash on honeybees. He tried gasoline and you name it, everything. What he found was 91% alcohol did the best of all of the alcohols. But if you'll take 2 tablespoons of Dawn Ultra dish soap and put in a gallon of water, it is as effective as 91% alcohol. And folks, it's a whole lot cheaper. So I moved to that late this. I did my August and my October washes with the soap water, and it works perfect. So just a thought. It's cheap too. So you need to set an action threshold. My action threshold is 5 mites per 300 bees. Anything over that, I need to take some kind of action to knock them down. I don't have many of those very often, but when I do, I take some kind. So remember we talked about there's 9 mites per 1 mite goes to a drone brood. This is the first thing that I do. Put this drone frame in and let the mites go to the drones, and when it's full and capped like this one was, put it in the freezer and kill them. The only problem you might have is if you are using all plastic foundation in your colony, they're all embossed with worker bee size cells. So you need to cut a corner out or something so your bees can build drone cells, because you do need a few drones around once in a while. So, yeah, so I trap drones in the spring. And all summer long, anytime I pull a frame out that looks like this, it goes to the freezer. I freeze it. Next time I'm fixing to work bees and it's been in there 48 hours or 72 hours, I take it out the day before and thaw it out and just carry it to the bee yard. I don't uncap it. I don't do anything. When I find a full one, I pull it out, put it on the pickup, put one of these in that's been thawed out, and I close it back up and keep going. So, but that's the first thing that I do. And this starts early in the spring, just as soon as I can get it into the colony. Anybody not familiar with them, put them right slam in the middle of where the open brood is, especially if it's a brand new frame. The bees don't like that, all that space, and they will draw it out really rapidly. What I have found with them over the course of the summer, when the bees decide they're not going to waste resources and raise drones, they start cannibalizing them unfertilized eggs that the queen's laying, and they like to store honey in them big cells. So normally by the end of the nectar flow, this frame, no matter where it's at, is full of honey. So I move it to the side for the winter time, and they will clean it out over the course of the winter. And by spring, I can take an empty drawn comb and move it back in where it belongs, into the middle. So that's the first thing I do. I start trapping drones. The second thing I do is I make a brood break in the cycle, okay? And there's 3 ways you can do that, and I use all 3 of them depending on the time of the year. So I'm going to discuss all 3 of them and just let you know how I do it. With my first mite wash in the first part of April, sometimes not till the 15th of April, if I have an overwintering colony that has more than 5 mites and 300 bees, I cage the queen in these frames that I made, okay? So I'm keeping the queen in the colony. If you remove her at this point, your bees will go into spaz factor 3 alpha, and they will not make a honey crop. They're more concerned with making a queen. But if you leave her in there in a cage for 16 days, so she can't lay any eggs, her pheromones are there. They can take care of her through the cage. They will make you a honey crop, and you can worry about replacing her later. Because I have found that when she's in there, when you release her on day 17, the lack of brood pheromone for a period of time, every one of these queens, in my experience, will be superseded. And that was what my research was about, because of the lack of brood pheromones. So anyway, I caged the queen on the first alcohol wash and leave her in there. And then after I release her and she starts laying, I go in and pull her out and replace her with another queen. Sometimes if I got 2 colonies in the same bee yard that I caged on the same day, when I uncage them and they start laying, I've been known to carry queen cages with me, cage both of those queens and just swap the colonies they're in, and they're perfectly fine. When they release them, the change in the brood or the queen's pheromones seem to keep them from superseding them. So, but that's what I do on the first wash. The second wash, somewhere our nectar flow is over with here about the 15th of June. Completely shut it down. So somewhere in here, I'm doing a second alcohol wash. And if my count is over 5 bees and 300 mites, or 5 mites and 300 bees, then I'm going to break the brood cycle by removing the queen. I'm going to make what I like to call a reverse split. And so a normal split would be to take 2 or 3 frames out of the parent colony and put them in a nuke and walk away and let the nuke raise a queen. But what I'm calling a reverse split is I'm going to remove the queen from the parent colony and let the parent colony raise a new queen to break the brood cycle. So if you're going to do it, you need to keep good track of your records, especially if you got more than 1 bee yard. I've got 6 or 7 bee yards, and I need to know who did what, when, and where to keep track. So keep good track of your dates that you're doing stuff, get all of your equipment ready. I got hooks for pulling caps off of anything. I got queen cages. You need a bottle of one of these squirt bottles. I'd suggest you get 2 because Murphy will be in your bee yard. If you've only got 1, the first squirt you try to do, it's going to plug up. If you've got 2, that one's going to work all day long. Because I don't keep the splits that I make in the same bee yard, I'm carrying them off to another bee yard. I go ahead and screen the faces of my nucleus boxes to keep any bees that I move into there to take them with. Keep in mind the nectar flows over, so I don't want to make a weak colony somewhere that's going to get robbed out. So when I make enough of these, I've got some field force in there as well. So what you want to do, it's just like a normal split. You want to go in and you want to remove 3 or 4 frames, but you don't want any capped brood because the mites are under the brood cap. The whole point of doing this is to make a nuke that you don't have a lot of mites in, that's got a laying queen in it, and leave the mites in the old parent colony where they're all going to be out from underneath of a brood cap before there's any more brood to crawl into. Okay, so it's a great time if your queen's not marked and you want to mark her, have something available. You can mark the queen because you're going to find her and move her. If you put her in a cage, don't leave her sitting in the sun. She'll cook on you while you're messing around. So if you can't find enough colony frames into there that don't have any capped brood, take that little hook I showed you and start unplucking them, getting them out of there. This is a great time too to see if your drone brood trapping is doing what you need it to do, because mostly you're going to pull these drones out and see, hey, I haven't got any mites into there, but you had mites in your wash, so you know they're there somewhere. Okay, so you want to take that squirt bottle, 1-to-1 sugar water, and mist, don't drown, mist every bee that you're moving into your reverse split, into the nuke box. What it's going to do, it's going to keep your bees licking the sugar water off of their sisters, and they're grooming mites off at the same time. So just move them over. If you don't have enough bees on the frames that you moved, before you shake any additional bees off over there, spritz them down with sugar water, even if you're not moving the entire frame. So the nectar flows over, you might ought to think about feeding them, depending on how much honey you moved over with them, especially if you're going to leave them in your same yard that they were shook from or taken from the parent colony, because the field force is going to go back home if you leave them in the same yard. I'm moving mine to out yards to spread the genetics. And so when I get them out there and unscreen them, they've still got foraging bees with them. But I most of the time, I still put a feeder jar on them till they're settled in and ready to go. So, but doesn't hurt a bit to feed your bees. 10 days later, after you've made the split, go back to the parent colony and check to see that they made queen cells. Here's why I say check. I found this one year. Them looked like they tried to make queens from drone larvae. Here's all your worker larvae over here to the right. Them sure some funky looking queen cells. And these, by the way, were the only 2 in that colony. So I pulled a frame with queen cells from another colony and moved it over just to make sure we had some in there. But go check, doesn't hurt a bit. I don't know what was wrong with these bees, but I didn't think that them was good looking queen cells. So put your honey supers back on. You haven't done anything that would keep your bees from curing the nectar that they brought in. At this point, while they're making a queen, the nectar flows over. Don't worry about it. Put them onto there. Let them make you a new queen and break the brood cycle. Piece of cake. You still got enough drones in the air in June or July, whenever your nectar flows over, for them new queens to mate with. The last the last time that I actually do anything when I do an alcohol wash is in the August or the third wash of the season. If I've got any colonies that have over 5 mites and 300 bees, I simply reach in and kill that queen, okay? Because I don't want to make a split at this point in the year. But if I kill that queen, they can make a new queen, and I still have queens in nuke boxes that I can go over and get. I'm also a queen producer, so I got a whole yard full of queens that I can go get one if I need it. But if in August you got too many mites, it's not going to be very long until your bees are going to be raising winter bees, and you need to knock your mites down to get the virus load down. So I just kill them in August. That 15 October, the end of September, the middle of October wash, depending on the weather, that's just to tell me who's got what kind of a mite count going into winter. I had this year, of the 67 colonies that I did alcohol washes in October, all but 3 of them had 5 or less mites and 300 bees. 3 colonies here at the house. One of them had 40, one had 23, and one had 22. Where they got them, I don't know. None of them had over 3 mites at the wash in August. So they may have found somebody else's beehive that crashed. I don't know. All 3 of them are alive today, but we got a lot of winter to go. So hopefully the hygienic behavior, they will get rid of them before then. So I also use hygienic queens. I actually raise VSH queens and I put them in. Now, I would tell you this, not every VSH queen has the hygienic quality. That's why you got to go do your mite washes. Sometimes I can go 2 years and not have 1 mite show up in a colony in my alcohol washes. Other times, you can't get through the second wash till one of these VSH queens that I know where she came from, her offspring just isn't controlling the mites. So she's out of here. I just pinch her, she's gone. But they got the ankle biters that they've done some studies with. The Minnesota Hygienic that came out of Marla Spivak's program up there in Minnesota, the suppressing mite resistant or the reproduction, they came out of Louisiana State, but they've kind of figured out that SMR and VSH is all the same quality, same lines, if you will. They just got a different name. So I've been buying breeder queens from VP Queens, Adam Finkelstein over in South Carolina, and breeding my own queens and selling them queens. But between the breaking the brood cycle, trapping the drones, and the hygienic queens, I'm having really good luck getting my bees control of the mites. So if you catch a swarm or you get a package, they come with mites. There ain't no way around it. So when you put them in the box, my suggestion would be that before they have any brood ready to be capped, take your squirt bottle with 1-to-1 sugar water and go in there and mist down all of your bees. Let them be peeling the mites off before the mites have any place to hide underneath the brood cap. So just a thought. So 2019, I needed to know, is this program, are they going to find the same mite counts that I find in my mite washes? So I registered 4 colonies of bees in the Bee Informed Partnership Sentinel Apiary program. And basically for 6 months, May through October, you collect 300 bees into their solution in their bottles, mail them to the University of Maryland, to the bee lab up there, and they count. They got somebody that's rolling bees over to make sure they get an accurate mite count. They send you a report back that says you had this many bees in this sample and this many mites in this sample. So I took these 4 colonies that had overwintered with the VSH queens. All of them had 0 mite counts in my April, I think it was the 3rd of April that year. 0 mite counts is why I picked these 4 colonies. So I had ordered 2 queens when the packages were coming up out of Georgia. I ordered 2 plain old queens that came up when the packages did, and I requeened 2 of these colonies for my own knowledge. When do the hygienic qualities get bred completely out? You with me? So far, so good. So through July, the only one this is 2.3 on number 2. They getting a little high, 2.3 mites. That would be 7 mites in 300 bees. There's what happened in August. Can you figure out which 2 got the Georgia queens in them? Yep. So I did this sample on the 14th of August and didn't get the results emailed to me till the 28th of August. So when I got the results, I thought, holy mackerel, this ain't going to work. So I went out there the next day on the 29th of August and I killed both of these queens to break the brood cycle. There's September's numbers. That's only 2 weeks later, so there's still a lot of mites that are underneath the brood caps that haven't hatched yet. Here's October. That was the last sampling of the year. Believe it or not, all 4 of these colonies made it through till the next year. Yeah. But that kind of gives you an idea of the difference between the Georgia queens and them hygienic queens that I've been using. So whether you use chemicals or you choose to do some kind of a non-chemical control for Varroa mites, you got to do something. You can't just do nothing, because the Varroa mites and the viruses are going to kill your bees, and they're going to be taking care of your neighbor's bees as well if you're anywhere close. You need to figure out what you're going to do, because they're watching this. Sam Ramsey's doing some research in Thailand on this Tropalaelaps right now. This is a new mite that's going to be worse than the Varroa mite if it ever gets here. This will change. You think Varroa mites change the beekeeping industry? This Tropalaelaps will be even worse. They lay eggs every 24 hours instead of every 30. And unlike the Varroa mite will make one wound in the side of the pupa, this Tropalaelaps, when it wants to eat, wherever it's at, it just makes a brand new wound. So it's destroying bees. It's going to be a terrible situation. So whatever you're going to do for your Varroa mite problem, figure out what it is, get it in shape, because it's going to be an ugly situation. Okay, so that's what I got for you this evening. Anybody got any questions?
If anybody has any questions, go ahead.
Looks like May does, but she's
Can you hear
talking.
me?
There she goes.
What's that?
Go ahead, May.
Can you hear me now? Okay. I want to ask you about your how you feel about Russian bees in regards to control the Varroa mites, and also how you feel about thymol, since it's most of a natural ingredient.
So I got to tell you about the Russians. I've had folks talk to me about the Russian bees. The Russians were more for control of tracheal mites than they were Varroa mites. I understand that there may be a little bit of Varroa mite resistance there as well. I would tell you that lots of folks along the coast here, and being a regional director, I've got 8 or 9 chapters that fall under me, and lots of folks over the years have decided they were going to go Russian, and so they ordered in the queens and requeened their colonies, and they made a big to-do about it in the spring about they went Russian. Most of them didn't talk very loud when they called me in the fall and they wanted some Italian bees to go through the winter. So I have not ever used the Russian bees. I can only tell you that a lot of people tried them for one season and decided to go back to the Italians in the fall.
My brother, he was in Michigan, and he said that they were really aggressive.
Yeah, well, I've heard that too, but you know, that's part of the allure, if you will. They say aggressive bees take care of the mites better. Yeah, I don't like mean bees. I don't keep mean bees. And on the thymol, yes, you can find a little bit of formic acid, oxalic acid, thymol, all of these natural chemicals. You can find a little bit in a honeybee's cavity. There may be some in the honey. My daughter-in-law is a physician's assistant, so I ran this past her that, okay, so there's a little bit in there anyway. So the theory is if you just put a bunch more into there, and she said, well, Pops, the human body has just a touch of cyanide in it. Do we keep shoving it in to see how much you can take? So I've never used the chemicals. I know one of them out there, and I won't mention names, one of them says it can kill Varroa mites underneath of the brood cap. You know, if that were really the case, we would all use that chemical the same day worldwide, and we wouldn't be worried about Varroa mites. I talked to, and there's somebody here from another association, I'm looking right at him, that I went up and talked to him, and I asked what, there was a fellow talked about, he just treated all of his colonies, and I asked him, I said, well, what was your mite count? He said, I didn't do a mite count, I just treated them all. So I put him on the spot. I said, well, if I walked into my doctor's office and they gave me a shot just because I was there today, they don't know if I need it or not. They just give me a shot just because I happen to show up today. I'm gonna find a new doctor. So you got to do a count. You got to figure out, and then you got to decide what are you going to use. Again, if you want to use thymol, I'm not going to say yay or nay. I choose not to use it. I don't know what it's doing to the stored bees bread and nectar and pollen and honey that the bees are going to need in the middle of the winter. Is it damaging that? We still don't know what's causing colony collapse disorder. We could be doing it to ourselves, contaminating what the bees need in the middle of the winter. So I can't answer, you know, I haven't messed with the Russians and I don't use thymol. So sorry, wish I had a better answer for you.
Thank you for that answer all the same.
Eric, I got a question for you. I'm a little curious about the April 15th being your first mite wash, especially you being further towards the coast down there. I know it's something to do with your management technique, but I'm trying. I don't know if I caught what that was, because that would seem a little late for me up here. It would seem a little late.
So last year, my first mite count happened on the 10th of March. Okay. Because of the weather. So I say about April 15th, okay. But when I can do mite washes, last year I was grafting queen cells in late February because I had drones flying. So this, you know, that was the earliest I ever grafted. Last winter, it was so warm a year ago that we had drones flying the whole winter. And so I was able to go in and do alcohol washes early, which then pushed it back. You know, the second one, I need to wait till the flow is over with. So 2 years ago, our flow stopped the middle of May when it got hot and dry. nothing bloomed after that. So I did my alcohol washes and started taking action after that. So I say 15 April, it's all based on the weather. When can you get in and do it? 1 year I washed half my bees and then we got a cold spell. And so the other half, they were 3 weeks later before they got washed. But yeah, so 15 April's an arbitrary date
Okay.
based on the weather. So, but the 15 June one, that's about when our nectar flows over. But again, if the flow's over early or goes late, that's going to be adjusted with that. So,
Yeah, that cleared it up. That makes a whole lot more sense. And I kind of figured it was more about your colonies, where they were at, instead of April 15th as the magic day. You know, we do,
No.
what is it? Mitathon is September the 7th through the 15th or whatever, you know. That's just because it's a mitathon, right? It's not because that means anything for anything. It just is those dates.
right. No, mine's based on when spring gets here. And after that, it's pretty much when the nectar flows over, and then about 15 August, I like to say. But if I'm busy or it's really hot, I might push it off a week one way or the other. So, but
Would you if your honey flow didn't end in June, let's say you had planted crops where you had honey flow all summer, would you make any modifications to your schedule?
probably wouldn't modify my schedule. Probably what I would do is I would, instead of making the reverse split with anybody that had over the threshold, the action threshold, I would probably cage the queen again in June. Because again, I'm trying to get my mite numbers down and the virus load down before we go too far into the fall when they're going to be raising winter bees. So I just like I cage my queens in the spring, so the bees continue to bring in nectar. If I had a nectar flow that went all summer, if I did my second mite wash in June, then I would probably at that point cage my queens. Just know that my experience for years now has been, when you cage that queen for 16 days and then release her, just as soon as she starts laying and the bees have, I mean, within 10 days after you release her, you're going to have supersedure cells in that box. So just be prepared for it, because it doesn't do you any good if you let them supersede the queen. She hasn't laid enough in a week or 10 days to keep that colony strong enough to go through the rest of the summer into the fall. And 2 breaks in the brood cycle that close together, you're probably going to doom that colony for the winter. You might as well do something else with it. So just an advice.
So
if you're going to cage your queen twice, put a mated queen in there afterwards.
could you alluded to reversing queens. Would that be a technique that would solve that problem between hives?
Sometimes, not always, but sometimes. So yeah, I've taken queen cages and put queen cage candy in them, and I always use new ones. You could use an old one if you wanted to. You could put a marshmallow into there, but they melt so fast that if you pull the cork, they'll release that queen too quick. So if you don't have queen cage candy, leave the cork in both ends of that empty cage with just the queen and no attendants in there. And in 3 days, go back and pull one of the corks and do a manual release. But yeah, you could pull the queens out of 2 different colonies, swap them, and that should wait until you've got brood into both of them colonies so they don't supersede that new queen. So does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Yeah, so I did a research. It's in the Bee Buzz, the winter issue of the Bee Buzz, researching brood pheromone and packages and the queen supersedure. So if you haven't read it yet, go out there and that'll kind of give you an idea what I'm talking about in brood pheromone and the lack of, and why I believe the queens get superseded.
Excellent questions. Thank you. Anybody else?
So I've given you my email address here. If at any point somebody comes up with another question, feel free to shoot me an email and I'll shoot you an answer back. So, but okay.
Thank you for that.
Thank
What
you,
was
Eric.
that bee buzz that you were speaking about, Eric?
It's in the winter issue of the Bee Buzz that came out about a month or so ago. I did my research article with Dr. Tarpey. I did a research last spring for my Master Craftsman certification. And basically, I don't believe what the books have been saying for years. My observation says that queens don't get superseded because they get old and their pheromones get weak. And it turns out I was correct. So, in fact, it's been since been published in the Journal of Apicultural Research out of the United Kingdom. And it's an open access document. So somebody send me, in fact, Jason, I will email you the link to that if you want to pass it out to anybody that wants it, and they could go read the scientific manuscript.
We'll definitely
Didn't
post
you-
that for you. Thank you.
Didn't your data show 75 to 25, something like that in that kind of
Yeah,
ballpark?
so my research, and I had 3 groups of 15, but my control colonies, which just were packages that got put in on wax foundation like a new beekeeper would do it, had a 73.3% supersedure rate in 12 weeks. But if you put a frame of open larvae in when you did it, we're down to about a 25 or 22, I don't have the numbers directly in front of me, percent. So about a 50% difference. And I had ordered and purchased 15 additional queens when I went to Georgia and got the 45 packages. Those 15 queens, the plan was to send them to Dr. Tarpey in his queen lab at NC State, and they were going to do a queen quality baseline. So we had some kind of idea whether or not 10 or 15 or 20 or 30% of the queens that came up weren't worth nothing to start with. That might have made some difference in our numbers coming out of that. But COVID shut down NC State. Them queens didn't make it to the queen lab. And so we had to go with what we had. So, but yeah, anyway, so I put a short article in the Bee Buzz. It's kind of layman's terms, but the scientific manuscript with all the fancy terms and numbers and blase, Dr. Tarpey and Dr. Metz did it. That'll be on that link that I'll send to Jason on an email when I get off the computer here.
I'll make sure that gets posted up. Thanks.
I'm guessing the Bee Buzz article is probably more fun to read.
It gets a little dry in the other one, yes. So yeah, it's like, holy mackerel, ain't this over with yet? So no, it's got good information, but yeah, I was pleased. So yeah, hopefully it'll help some beekeepers keep their bees alive because their queens won't get superseded. You know, a brand new colony of bees needs to build up, and when they supersede the queen and set the whole mess back 30 days, we got a lot of beekeepers that their packages don't make it through that first winter because there wasn't enough bees or something, you know? So I don't know, maybe it'll help.
Absolutely. Well, if there's no more questions, Eric, we really appreciate you presenting today. It was very informative. I think everybody took something away from it. I'm sure if you could see us all in person, we'd be clapping. If not, everybody just kind of raise your hands, give a thanks to Mr. Eric and taking time out of his evening to speak with us. And so thank you, Eric. There was a lot of good information there, and I'm sure we'll be able to see that article passed along within the club. So hope you have a
Okay,
good evening.
thanks for the invite.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay,
Yeah, have a
I'll
good
leave
one.
you all to your business.
Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, sir. All right, guys. That was a good informational session, and I'm sure everybody was able to gain something out of it. In the meantime, I think it's good for us to just get an idea of where we all need to be on our personal beekeeping level. And so with that being said, I'm gonna turn it over to Mr. John Converse. He's going to give you a beekeeper's corner and sort of a personal, what you should and shouldn't be doing now and what to expect with your bees. So John, if you're ready, just go on ahead and take over.
Can everybody hear me all right? Okay. First thing is sort of a housekeeping thing. I wanted to announce that we have an apiary schedule for January through April, both at Clayton and at the Ag Center. We have quite a few events set up. The first being the building painting on this Saturday, the 23rd, looking for volunteers to help me finish painting the building. I will have had one coat on there by Saturday. So if you could all come out and help me finish it, I'd appreciate it. If you would call me or text me at 919-628-4939. This is in the Beekeepers monthly publication. We've got several events set up this year other than the painting. Starting in February, we're going to do hive inspections if the weather permits, and we're also going to have a build day where you can bring your equipment and we'll help you build it. March 5th, 13th, we're going to do hive inspection and also do mite counts with all three methods, including the IPM board, the sugar shake, and the alcohol wash. So you can see the difference between the three. And then March 20th at the Clayton Apiary, we're going to do a hive split, try to build our hive numbers back up. So if you need to see how a hive split's done, now's the time to come and see that. And then April 10th, we've got another Clayton inspection and mite count. And then on the 24th of April, we're going to do another split at the Ag Center Apiary, and we'll also be doing mite count demonstrations. Also, Clayton is supposed to be receiving some packaged bees, and we'll do a demonstration of installing those packaged bees, but it's going to be a last minute notice. Whenever those bees come in, we're going to want to put them in that day or the next day. But if you want to come see that done, you're welcome to. Getting to the Beekeeper's Corner, if you haven't registered your hives with Drift Watch, please do that. That link is in the Beekeeper's Corner. You got to re-register them every year, so get your hives registered. If you're doing inspections, it needs to be 60 or 65 degrees. Know why you're going in and doing the inspection. You need to lift the hives at the rear and see how much honey you've got in there. If the hives are getting light, then you're going to need to put candy boards or sugar or candy bricks on the hives. Also, hive beetles are a major problem still. If you're putting winter patties on, don't overdo it because they'll eat them just as well as the bees will. So keep the quantity in the hive as reasonable as possible and replenish as you need to. And then if you got weak hives, you can combine them. I've done that in the past where we've taken a real weak hive and put it on top of a strong hive and let them grow together basically for 2 or 3 weeks and then separate them back apart. If you go back to, I think, the December or November Beekeepers Corners, there's a link in there how to do that. The bees are still bringing in pollen right now, which is unusual this time of year. Around the 20th of January, we're starting to see red maples bloom, and that should last until around the 5th of March. Though I think some of them may be blooming now based on the color pollen that people are seeing. The temperature is going to increase about a degree per week, both the lows and the highs, all the way through the end of February. So they're starting to creep up, and the bees will become more active on warm days. Let's see. Keep your IPM boards clean, keep a check on them. Make sure your hives have adequate ventilation. Keep an eye on die-offs. If you should have a hive die-off, you may need to take it apart and clean out the dead bees, just so that the remaining bees can survive. And you need it, more than likely it's a food issue. So if you have to, you may have to add honey or some sort of candy brick or a winter patty or something like that for them to survive on. The die-off that I had a few years ago, we put honey on there and the hive survived. Let's see. If you're going to treat with oxalic acid, you're slowly running out of time. The brood present in the hives is at the minimum right now. So if you're going to treat, you need to get it done. Make sure your hives are secured. I know a beekeeper locally here that had the wind blow the top off his hive, and he ended up losing the hive because he didn't know that had happened. And look around for trip hazard in your apiary. This time of year, we're going to start losing a lot of dead limbs and such. If you're going to order nukes, you need to get on with it and package bees and queens. Let's see, and you need to get your equipment ready for spring. And I'll remind everybody that the Johnson County Agriculture Extension Service has a frame assembly jig available for loan. They also have honey extractors, uncapping rollers, uncapping knives, and oxalic acid vaporizer, battery, and respirator free of charge. You will have to buy the oxalic acid from one of the bee suppliers. And anybody wanting to plant pollinator plants, the Johnson Soil and Water Conservation District rents a 7-foot Great Plains no-till drill. It's $10 for an acre with a minimum of $50. So that's an option for anybody wanting to plant pollinator plants this spring. There is an article in here where we interview one of our members, Fred. You may want to take a look at that at your own convenience. It's an interesting article. And then if anybody's got any questions, let me hear them. I'll be glad to. Also, if you have anything that you want covered in the apiary inspections or demonstrated, please let me know, because we're always interested in helping club members with needs, basically if you need something. So are there any questions?
I don't want to be the only one to ask questions, but I do got a question for you.
Sure, ask me a question. Try to embarrass me.
No, I ain't gonna do that. I'm just curious that first inspection, when you finally get that, I'm calling it first inspection because I hadn't had a day that I was at home that it was warm enough, I thought, to pull a frame of brood out. So I'm just wondering, when you pull that, first time you start pulling a few frames of brood out, what are you looking for, and what actions would you take depending on what you might see?
Well, based on last year, and that's a bad assumption, but we did a split on February 22nd. Ron Laster and I did. Yeah. And comment on that, the queen didn't make it past August before she had to be replaced. So I don't think she mated with enough drones. But I would be looking at is she laying? Is the brood pattern good? You know, I don't know when that first inspection is going to be because I keep looking at the weather, and it last Friday I was in a nuke because I had to go in there. I'm waiting for them to die, but they seem to be going on. They're a Russian hybrid, so they don't have a big. They got a little tiny ball up there in one corner, but they seem to be ornery enough to want to sting me. So I'd just be looking for the amount of food there and whether the queen's laying, and if not, then I'd go look at some other hives and see what's going on. You know, what you're looking for is the difference from the norm, in my opinion. You're much more experienced than I am, Greg, so I would love to hear your comment.
Now, I don't know about that, John, but I always think about whether I need to rearrange anything, you know. I hear too many people, I think, say, especially beginning beekeepers, and maybe people are giving them bad advice, you know, let's checkerboard, you know. I mean, that's awful idea to do in January, February, or March, in my opinion. I just think it's way too early. You start checkerboarding and you're splitting the brood up. It just doesn't make any sense to me. So I am more concerned with confining them. So I'd rather take a double deep, you know, and if there's nothing in part of that box, I'd rather mash it together, or put it in a 5-frame nuke and, you know, put a second 5-frame on top of them. But I like to keep them confined. That's just my strategy of beekeeping, whether it makes any sense or not to y'all. That's the way I do it.
One of the disadvantages or advantages I have is I don't run any double brood boxes. I only run singles with supers on top. And of course, now the queen excluders are off, but at the Ag Center, we do have some doubles, but you know, like you said, you want to keep that cluster together. Now, I would move food in close to them if
Yep.
the food was far away. And something that I have said to myself, I will not take the sugar off my hives until April 15th, based on past experiences where I've almost had die-offs, because especially with Italians, they build up so fast that they just get ahead of themselves, in my opinion. I may be wrong about that, but that's been my experience.
I agree.
So,
And when you say sugar, you mean solid sugar, not.
yeah, I put powdered sugar, not powdered, but granulated sugar up top, and I spritz it with water. And that's another technique that I use in all my hives is I get fast food trays from my neighbor who gets Chinese, and I put the sugar in there, and I put them on the center frames, front to back. So if I get any condensation, it falls in that sugar, not on the bees. And it keeps that sugar down, and it gives them a place to go get food readily. So that's my thought. The other thing is I run 3 3/8-inch holes on my shim for ventilation. So I've always got good ventilation in my hives. Because I've had mold build up in hives without ventilation.
Yeah, I've just 2 years ago, I started using shims on all of mine in the winter, and I have seen a huge difference with shims. That's something that's going to stay on all of my hives.
Yeah, well, what I do is my shims are 2.5 or 3 inches tall.
Yep.
I've got 2 holes on one end that's going to go on the south side and 1 hole on the north side, so I have cross ventilation. But I cut a little disc out aluminum and put over those holes and bend them out, then nail them at the top, so I've got wind breaks. The wind can't just blow through.
Mm-hmm.
And also it keeps the rain from blowing in when we get those torrential rains. And that's what I do, and I like them. And I gave those to the 4-Hers this year too, and I'm hoping they're using them. But and if I have to, I could slip in and add sugar real quick.
Right.
So the other thing I'm moving away from is telescopic covers and inner covers and moving towards migratory covers. I don't like the inner covers. So,
Now, John, I see that you said that you keep the IPM boards on. Now, I don't have mine on right now. It's just a screen bottom.
well, there's a member watching me right now that probably can't even find all his IPM boards. So it's a personal preference.
Okay.
I'm moving back towards solid bottom boards. I think they might be better for me, but there are advantages to the IPM boards. The biggest advantage is you can look under there and see what's going on if you got your hives up high enough. I have all mine on stands, so my neighbor Rebecca, who helps me, she'll look under and tell me what's going on. I can't do it because my knees are so bad.
Mhm.
So
Okay.
I guess I could get a mirror and do it, but the only thing I will say is if you don't have your IPM boards on and you get wind and it's blowing really good, then you get a lot of cooling on that hive and they're going to use more honey. So be
Okay.
aware of that. If you got cold, wet, windy weather, you may run out of food sooner.
Monday. Okay.
So
Okay.
it's a personal preference. As
Well, this-
everybody says in beekeeping, there is no right way. There's just your way. So
This is my first winter, so I'm still trying to figure it out.
right. Any other comments, questions? Don't ever hear from Randy anymore. Oh, you doing okay, Randy?
Yeah, you gonna put me on the spot, huh?
I am.
Oh, good.
I haven't seen you Dow shop in a long time, so I wanted to say hi.
Yeah. Happy New Year to you guys.
Thank you.
How's that 5-county nuke doing?
I'm maintaining, man. I lost some of them, but it's all good.
Did you get one or two from us this past year? Didn't you get a nuke from us at 5-county last year?
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah.
Can I get
one of
another?
them or two?
I got one.
Okay. Didn't make it all right?
Nope.
No.
did.
Scratch
did.
that whole conversation.
It sure did. But it's all good. No, it didn't make it, but it was all good. It's part of the nature, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it is.
But these like those Varroa mice was bad this year for some reason on my end.
Yeah, they were.
And I had some guys, I don't know if farmers or whatever, they're spraying, and I don't know if they were trying to do some land, or I don't know what they were spraying, but anyway, it got over on my bees too, and my bees was doing good one week. I mean, everything's flowing or whatever case may be, and all of a sudden now, when I went out there, they were dead. So,
You know, if that happens, you need to call your apiary inspector.
yeah.
It's really important.
Have you registered on Drift Watch, Randy?
I knew you were gonna ask that, John. I knew it.
Would you please register on Drift Watch so that you also need to go talk to the farmers, because the farmers, once they understand what the problem is, they'll call you and let you know they're going to spray.
Yeah.
John,
Yeah,
what's the other registration? There, I can't. There's one with the I can't think who it's with now, but it's actually a much more effective registration than Drift Watch, and I can't remember all the rules, but Drift Watch is voluntary, but the other registration, they have to call you.
Yeah, you're thinking of NC State.
There you go.
Yeah, Don Hopkins said that they have to follow that one. Now, I think it costs, let's say you had 3 apiaries, you'd have to pay $10 per apiary to register it.
But Drift Watch, they really don't have to call you. It's purely voluntary. But the one that you're talking about, it's a law. They have to call you if you register on it. But I can't remember how to do it. I had a form around here somewhere, but I never did it.
I do know that the state inspectors with pesticide people take this stuff very seriously. But I will also tell you that it will take them over a year to handle investigation. So, I mean, what happens is they take samples of the bees and they end up at the state lab, but the state lab does the bees last. They do everybody else, all the other agencies first. So it just takes a long time to get a response back from the state. But a lot of times they will run down who caused the problem. And, you know, they're responsible for your hives.
Okay.
Any other questions? Comments? I love snide comments. If anybody has a problem, needs help or something, feel free to call me. That number's on the April schedule. Give me a call. If you want to write it down, it's 628-4939. I'll be glad to help you any way I can. Questions? And as I said, I don't get enough snide comments, so. Okay, well, I'm gonna mute.
Can everybody hear me okay?
Yep.
I think so. Okay. Yeah, thanks, John. John's been doing a lot of work over there, April, and we're very appreciative of it. And we're hoping for a lot of good participation this year with the activities coming up. So if you're interested, make sure and get out there. If you've got any questions, need directions, please reach out. John can happily answer, or if you need to post on Facebook, somebody will reach out to you. So I think that's all that we have today. If anybody else has anything, just you're welcome to chat here, or send an email, whatever's easiest for you, and hopefully somebody will be able to get back to you shortly. But other than that, guys,